If the only standard we ever use to judge what is right is what we think, it's easy to justify any position. We're always right. How cool is that, right? But there's an objective standard of what's right, and we all know that. We see it in the law. That guy was a jerk, so I just ran him over. Doesn't carry much weight, right? We see that in our employment. Try telling your employer you just want to stay home and retire, but you want them to keep paying you. Our children know it. How many times have you heard a kid stomp their foot and say, "That's not fair," or "That wasn't nice"? In Francine Rivers' book, The Warrior, about Caleb, she's telling us what his thoughts were when she sees his sons. And she says, Caleb's sons, were doing whatever was right in their own eyes. What God had given them now ruled their days and nights. Caleb grieved over it, trying each day and night to bring them back to what they were when times were harder. They didn't want to come to listen, and not anymore. And it was by God's grace that they continued to prosper. But they had been warned when the persons of steadfast faith and curses of rebellion had been read to them. They knew when Joshua had told them, remember at the end of his life, that the difference between showing God your faith, your genuine faith, and following it with joy versus following it out of obedience or fear is that the latter just leads to rebellion and sin. In Deuteronomy 12, before entering the promised land, everybody was worshiping God in whatever way they chose, so they could put their own spin on it and include habits from those around them that were worshiping other gods and their own religious history, their own spirituality they brought with them from Egypt. And in verse 8, it says, "You are not to do as we do here today, everyone doing as they see fit." In Judges 21, it says the Israelites made a vow not to let anyone marry the tribe of Benjamin, but then they realized it would end one of the 12 tribes. So they tried to come up with an agreement that would make it all work out. And with the tribe of Benjamin from the annual festival of the Lord, in verse 25, they said, you know what? In those days, Israel had no king, so everyone did what they saw was fit. Do you think they should get to steal wives just because they made a vow they shouldn't have made? I don't know. If I was one of the women, I might not like that very much. Proverbs 12:15 and 11:21:2, Solomon shares some thoughts about that. It says, the way of a fool seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. So maybe doing what's right in our own eyes is kind of foolish. In chapter 21, he says, a person may think their own ways are right, but the Lord weighs the heart. Not just what you want to do, but what you know in your heart is right. 1 John 1:8 says, if we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. Have you ever thought you could deceive yourselves even about what's right and wrong? You ever thought you would just do it your way? God never suggests that in all of his word. A great cloud of witnesses before and after us pled as rivers images Caleb, grieving over his sons. Who are you grieving over? Who are you asking God to touch their lives before they see the consequences of their sin? I don't know about you, but I usually have at least one or two I'm praying over like that because I see the train coming, and I bet you do too. So your challenge this week is to do a heart check. What are you doing because you think it's a good idea without asking for God's mind on the matter? What have you done because it seemed right in your own eyes, maybe in the past? And then I want you to pray, asking God forgiveness for the times you've relied on your own counsel over his, asking God's counsel on everything you're doing right now, and then asking God's mercy, guidance, and wisdom for someone else who's doing something their own way. See you next time. Have a great day in the Lord.